Hey everybody, Dr. Dave Marquis here, and I wanted to talk to you about something that most people don't want to even say, and that's bile. I wanted to talk about this because there's two fundamental things that I try and teach my patients when they first come in, and it has to do with the ability to make this area of the body a good furnace so that you've got a great factory there to allow you to metabolize anything that goes through this port. Many times people will ask that question like, well, what's the most important thing that I could be taking? And if you've ever been to my office, there's a portion of it that is really dedicated to nutrition. If you haven't been here, then imagine walking into a nutrition store and seeing this wall of different supplements and maybe getting overwhelmed and thinking, oh my gosh, do I need all of this stuff? And the answer is absolutely no. But everyone should have a pharmacy that would be unique to their needs and what their labs indicate that their body would benefit from and their life experience combined with their genetics. So there's a lot of pieces that are used to put the puzzle together to allow somebody to understand how to optimize their well-being. Well, digestively, there's two things that are super duper important, and I would even argue that they trump all the other supplements that you might find in a store or in a doctor's office. Because if your furnace, your GI tract, is not working well, it almost doesn't matter what you take, because then it becomes more of a game of whack-a-mole where you just have to take loads of something to be able to even metabolize a little bit of it. Optimizing our furnace, our stomach and our intestinal tract, is a huge priority, in my opinion, for all cases as they come in the door, so that we know that, okay, at least that's sound, that's going to work, and now whatever we add to that, we have a better chance of knowing that they're going to metabolize it, and then we can let the labs prove that out. Backing up again, I threw that word out, bile. You've all probably experienced moments in time where maybe you ate a little bit too much, or then bent over and you got a little bit of spit up in the back of your throat. And that acidy feel there is a mixture of some stomach acid, but sometimes bile will come up if you've actually vomited, and it does not taste good. But it's a really important substance, and it's made in your liver, it's stored in your gallbladder, and then it's released in kind with the amount of fats that you consume. So I'm going to back up again, one more step. Digestion is comprised of many different steps. Interestingly, the very first one has to do with our brain. And there's a nerve up there that I've made a whole nother video on called your vagal nerve that really regulates, or I should say conveys, much of the information of your autonomic nervous system, which digestion is a huge component of. And if that nerve is working well and you walk into a house and you smell something really good that's cooking, it triggers a memory. And you go, I like that. And you might even start to salivate. We all do that. And that's a neurological process where you actually start to secrete some of the enzymes necessary to allow you to break down some of the things that you're about to stick into your mouth. Well, that process doesn't end in the mouth. It actually starts a whole chain of events that go downstream. So imagine this. You're going to sit down and you're going to have a meal. Let's say you're going to have a piece of salmon and maybe there's some rice there and maybe there's some greens. That salmon, of course, has some protein and some fats in it. Hopefully it's not a farm-raised salmon that ate a whole bunch of soybeans or other things that fish wouldn't normally eat. Hopefully they had a chance to eat plankton and some algae and things that would allow their essential fats to be the type that you want in your body. Well, regardless, they have fat in them. And that fat and that protein requires acid and bile to be broken down. Human beings, over time, unless we keep working on ourselves, start to become less efficient at breaking stuff down. Statistically, after about the age of 20-ish, you're going to start producing less acid and bile annually, by the tune of about 5% annually. So when you get to my age in life, you don't have a whole lot to work with in the gastrointestinal tract unless you're doing something about it. When you eat those meals, sometimes people will notice that it kind of sits heavy on them. In fact, I've had many people, even teens, come in and say, I can't eat any protein. It just makes me nauseous. And anytime I hear that phrase, I can't eat protein, it's like ding, 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 ding. I know that their gallbladder and their liver is not stepping up to the plate and doing its job. inevitably, if I can help that individual get to the point where they start to use a little bit of acid and bile with that meal, they'll start to be able to break that down more efficiently, and they won't feel nauseated, and their body will actually be able to tap into those amino acids from the protein and those fatty esters from the fat and start to re-regulate their hormones and rebuild their muscles and their skin and everything that those compounds are used for in the body. But many of us walk around literally in a mild state of nutrient deficiency because this furnace here isn't working well. We can each evaluate kind of where we're at on that basis. There are numerical ways that you can do it. There's actually pH tests. And I've given another video on pH, but just to give you a reminder, your stomach needs to be pretty acidic. And if it's not acidic and it's a little more alkaline, which so many of us are because of taking either elemental calcium, or some people rely on Tums because they might get a little bit of indigestion, those are hallmark signs that you need acid. And so by adding a little bit more acid back in, remember I said the first step is the brain? Well, the second step is the acid produced in the stomach. And then some of that acid causes a hormone/enzyme to be released called gastrin, and then those two little guys, I call them the two amigos, they leak out into the upper portion of the intestines, the duodenum, and then that triggers the liver to cause the gallbladder to release a little bit of bile, and that makes this soup called chyme. Chyme then triggers the pancreas to dump some of its enzymes, and now you've got a digestive soup that can actually move things down. And when all of that's working well, you can eat your meal and not feel heavy, not feel nauseated, not get gassy and bloated, because your pH is going to keep that flora in check, and it's going to keep it in the small intestines where they belong, instead of allowing them to kind of move up north where you get SIBO and people get distended and feel uncomfortable. So we've got to think about these digestive processes and recognize that there's really simple tools that we can use. Bile is one of them, acid is another, and as I said, I would really argue that those are the two most important things that you could do nutritionally before you look at anything else. And finding where your need is really just a process of trial and error, using small amounts with a meal that has some fat and protein to begin with, and work forward. Many times when I say, oh, you're going to need a little bit of bile to support your gallbladder, somebody will say, well, I had my gallbladder out. And I think it's a travesty that people will have their gallbladder removed, and the doctor doing that doesn't suggest to them, hey, you know what, for the rest of your life you might consider this because it's going to really help you out in digesting these things that are really important for your well-being. You think about our ability to metabolize fat and what we are. Well, our brain, for example, is like 74% fat. And if you're not able to metabolize fatty acids well, you're going to have a hard time repairing that. And you think about your skin when it starts to thin out, or your blood vessels. Every tissue in the body is made from this stuff, so we need to optimize our ability to metabolize it. So just to recap, things that I've taught in other videos that we all need to optimize and understand relative to digestion: vagal nerve for the autonomic nervous system, making sure that we're producing enough acid out of the stomach so that the liver in kind will start to produce a little bit of bile. As we age, we become less efficient at that, so you're probably going to need to take a little bit with each meal that has fat and protein. You'll know how much you need, for example, on the acid side, because when you start to take acid, it makes you less gassy and bloated, and you have less reflux, less GERD, all of those uncomfortable symptoms here. Well, if you've taken too much acid, then you actually do overshoot the runway and you'll get a little bit of heartburn. So there's a sweet spot in there that you have to figure out where it works for you. And then the next spot is the liver with the gallbladder and the bile. And if you don't have a gallbladder, that's okay. You still need some bile. And you need it in kind or in time with the fat that you're ingesting. There's different forms out there. There's straight ox bile, which tends to be the strongest, and strongest isn't necessarily better in this sense. You kind of need to figure out what works for you. There's forms that are kind of buffered with other enzymes. So there's bile mixed with lipases, and many of those are based off of some of the things in the betaine hydrochloride realm, so it might be added to a little bit of acid as well. Play with different digestive enzymes that contain these things, but realize that the enzyme portion is really the last step. We really need to start with a little bit of acid and bile and then work through that. As you do, you should experience a flatter tummy, less gas and bloating, be able to enjoy having something that has some fat and protein in it without getting nauseated or feeling heavy. If you have those hallmark symptoms of any of those three things that I just mentioned, gas, bloating, distension, or nausea, or feeling heavy, that was 4. Ask your doctor. Say, hey, you know what? I think something might be off in my furnace here. Can you guide me in this process? And you might need to find yourself a good functional medicine doctor that can do that, because many docs just reach for the Tums or the Prilosec or the Nexium, and they kind of shut the whole system down, and that's not what it's about. You need to use this region. This was all put together for a really important reason. And we each need to learn about how ours work and then optimize that. Hope that was helpful information, and I hope that you enjoy your next meal. Have a great day.